Greetings, Gatehouse Insiders. Welcome back to another episode of Gatehouse Insights. Today, I'm joined by Catherine Brooks, where she'll be speaking about her new role and her transferable skills from law, how flexible work is important to her and her family, why getting back to work after her second son was important for her mental health, and much, much more. Make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel to catch it all. Good morning, Catherine.
Hello, Louise. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you for joining me again. So I wanted to really begin today with your current role at Wendy Brooks, because it's a role that's not traditionally thought about from lawyers. So I was hoping you could share a little bit more about this role and what you do on a day-to-day.
Oh, I would love to. So I actually joined the family business. So my mother set up the business, I think it's nearly 7 years ago now, and my father joined the business a few years ago. They're sort of yin and yang. So my father does kind of the operations, and Wendy does the big picture and the strategy and the schmoozing with, important people. And so I was really lucky to be able to join the business at the start of last year, and I'm still consulting with Law Squared. So I feel like I've got sort of the best of both worlds, because after being in the law for 12 years, it kind of gets into your blood, and it's hard to sort of leave, altogether. So really enjoying still doing a little bit of law, but Wendy Brooks Partners has been a whole new world for me, because it's all been about learning strategic fundraising and working with clients to look at how they can optimize their fundraising, particularly in the area of philanthropy. So we do a lot of work where we look at accessing grants through philanthropic means, which is really interesting. So the reason why it's called Wendy Brooks and Partners is because it's really based on the great connections that Wendy has built up over many, many years of working in the sector. So from my perspective, and I always joke with people that in our family, we're sort of half teachers and half lawyers. And I think there's a lot of crossover between those professions and now fundraising, because fundamentally, to be a good lawyer, you need to be good at reading, writing, thinking analytically, but also communicating well. And so with Wendy Brooks and Partners, we spend a lot of time with our clients up front doing strategy work, thinking about what is the actual need that they are trying to address, and if they didn't exist, what would the world be without? So really trying to communicate to funders, this is why the organisation must exist, and the aspirational goals are X, Y, Z, and then really drilling down to the programs that these clients produce and develop, and looking at how do we communicate the need to funders, because often the people working in the business or in the organisation, because they're working with these issues on a daily basis, they forget that the rest of the world doesn't already know those situations. So a really good example, working for an amazing organisation called the Song Room, and I didn't realise, but 3 out of 4 primary schools don't have a dedicated music teacher. And my mind was blown, because I grew up with music, and my primary school in Geelong had a fantastic music teacher, and we also had a lot of extracurricular activities around that. So even just that statistic of understanding that a lot of children don't get access to music then assists us in communicating the need to funders. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the work I do is really around getting the pitch material right. How do we pitch to funders what the need is, what the organisation is trying to achieve, and if the funders gave us money, how would we really shift the dial? So that's the bit that I get really excited about and love doing. And then we work with a client all year to try and build up their relationships in philanthropy. So again, I love that element of it, because it's about people. It's about connecting the right people to the right people. So we do a lot of funder meetings and introductions and building up that wealth of relationship. And then hopefully at the end of the year, and we've just had some really great results, we get told you've been successful with some funds, and then we start the acquittal process. So that's actually making sure that we're using the money for what we said we were going to use it for, and that we can demonstrate to that funder that we're doing good with that money, because that's a really important part of that donor stewardship as we go through the relationship. So just on Friday we found out that we got $90,000 from one fund, and that money is going to go to mothers at risk, so mothers that are really struggling helping their children, and in COVID they needed that that support even more. So our client is building a virtual platform. So that money is just going to assist so many people within our community. So yeah, it was a bit of a happy dance moment, and that's, I guess, the reward.
Now, who are your funders typically? What do they look like?
It's interesting, like in the philanthropy world, funders are generally rich people, wealthy people, but there's a mixture of people that have actually already passed. So dead people that set up these amazing trusts and foundations. And then there's a group of people that look after those trusts and foundations. They might actually be lawyers, or they might be organisations such as equity trustees or perpetual, and they manage a huge range of funds. So our job is to really make sure that we know who are the people, the actual decision makers. So each trust will just, it'll have documents that will determine where they can spend their money, but then we need to work out who are the decision makers that are going to make that call, and really try and build that relationship with them, and make sure that they understand, again, the need and what we're trying to do. So they can be, but they can also be private philanthropists. So we had a call a couple of weeks ago from a fellow who's in finance in Sydney, and he just said, I want to give $500,000 before the end of the year. So he wants to give it to an area that he's interested in, and we need to match, his interest to the programs and our clients that we've got on our books. So that's a really exciting opportunity there, and we can get calls from government or from philanthropists, sometimes, private individuals. So just, from a raft of people. But, we spent a good deal of COVID really working on our database, which we've decided to call Grantly. And, that's a wealth of knowledge now. We're just really building up all of our information and basically everything inside Wendy's head, and making sure it's in a database that our clients can really tap into and access those opportunities.
Good. It's always the business is always seems to be in one person's head. So it's good that you're getting it out.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure it's similar with John.
Yeah, exactly. It's like he's got all the knowledge. It's like, come on, John, download it. So
exactly, yeah.
So a complete different role to your employment law role. What inspired the change? What made you take that move?
Look, I think a couple of things. Definitely for me, work-life balance has always been a big issue, and I've talked to you about that in the past. And working at Law Squared, Dimitri's team were, amazing at giving me a huge amount of flexibility. But at the end of the day, the clients, demand a certain amount of effort and input, and turnaround is always very short, particularly in employment law. You might get a call in the morning saying, I'm sacking someone in 10 minutes, send me all the documents I need. Or we've had the calls where, I'm appearing in Fair Work Commission in half an hour. I thought I could do it on my own, but I actually now need you there. So, it can be quite stressful. Whereas the work that I'm doing at Wendy Brooks and Partners, we really try and work on a 12-month basis. So it's a really sort of considered strategic approach. So the time frames are quite different, and so I think that was quite appealing. But fundamentally it was around the fact that Wendy has built this amazing family business, and I kept hearing and seeing and feeling all the amazing work that they were doing, and thinking, it'd be really good to make sure that the business could keep going even post Wendy and Rod retiring. So yeah, it was a really good time for me to think about how I could transition across, and to see if I liked the industry, if I could learn it, if the clients liked me, for example. And I think it's been a good match.
Yeah. Now, you would have had some transferable skills that would have come across from law to this role. Could you share a little bit about that? Because I think it's such an important point that lawyers sometimes don't realise that they've been practicing law, and they think they can't do anything else, but they actually do have transferable skills to come across. So could you dive deeper into that for us?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we were joking yesterday, I think 6 of our 14 staff have a law degree. So I think it is definitely a really great degree and skill set to have. One of the things I think I've really appreciated learning in law is just how to think really logically from A to Z, really how to work through a problem and consider, how you're presenting that problem and how you're going to solve it. So I think that's a really important aspect. For me in particular, because I was sort of, a partner and quite senior, and I'd been doing a lot of really tricky negotiations in the EBA space, I was very comfortable, and I am very comfortable in presenting to boards and being able to communicate to them financial information or, problems, and then suggesting a recommendation. So I think if anyone is looking at what kind of skill sets will be useful elsewhere, being able to communicate to leadership teams is always going to be useful, no matter what sort of industry you end up going into. And I think the other one is conflict management. There are plenty of times where I could tell you where I've been screamed at by my own client, whether that's the CEO or the CFO or not even, someone on the other table, but your own client. And often it's not personal. It's not that they're screaming at me for stuffing up or doing something wrong. It's really been just around them feeling a huge amount of pressure, and people have that tendency when you're feeling pressure to sort of push it down. So being able to manage that kind of conflict and to calm people and to provide them with that comfortability that you're able to deal with their issues, that you're able to take on board what they're saying, that you're able to assist them. I think that's a really unique skill set that a lot of lawyers unfortunately have to deal with, but I think it's something that can be very useful in any industry, really.
Now, for lawyers that are, I suppose, considering a change like this, whether they've been practicing for quite some time or they're quite junior or even graduates, where do they start to explore options like this? Because I didn't know this was an option till, I know you, so that's the only reason why I know it's an option. But yeah, where do people start? How do they explore different avenues like this?
Yeah, I think it's tricky. A lot of people come to Wendy in particular and say, I'm a lawyer and I hate this industry, or I'm really, not loving my role, and I would really like to work in the not-for-profit space. I want to be able to give back, but I'm not sure in what regard or in what aspect. And I think that's a really great first step, to reach out to someone that is in a leadership position within an industry that you want to go to and start to get to understand the different roles that fit within that. So, from not working within a not-for-profit perspective, fundraising is just one of the very many roles that you could do with a legal skill set to give back to the sector. It's just one area. There's many other areas. So I think it is really important to reach out to industry leaders and to talk to them. I've been really surprised this last year during COVID, and Anna Levinsky, head of L'Oreal, is really big on making sure that we're continuing to do our business development through COVID, particularly for women. And so each week I've been reaching out and trying to schedule that in with someone. And, because I'm new to the industry, really trying to make sure I'm building up those connections in a new industry. And I've been so surprised at how many people that have responded to me. I didn't know them, they didn't know me, but I've reached out to them on LinkedIn and said, I would really appreciate a half an hour, window in your diary to have a Zoom catch up. And people have been so wrapped, I think, because they've been in lockdown or they've been more isolated than normal. They're quite happy to speak to someone outside of their normal day-to-day workplace. So I would recommend that people do that, sort of identify what industry, some leaders in that industry, and reach out and start talking to them. But also being brave. I had so many people last week say to me, oh, I'm so sorry you're already back at work, that you've had to go back to work. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm so excited to go back to work. Like, I can genuinely say that. And whether, I've been doing some pretty time-sensitive legal work, but I've also been doing a lot of, hustling on behalf of Wendy Brooks and Partners. And I've just been loving it. And I think that's what everyone should be aiming for. And if 2021 is your year to think about, should I be getting out of law, then definitely would recommend thinking about how can you use the skill sets you've already gained and put that into an industry or a sector that really you find rewarding and that gives back.
Yeah, it's good. I've been hanging to get back to work too. So it's good to know other people are also, they love what they do and they get back into work, and, so it's good.
Absolutely.
I want to shift us onto flexible work, because this is something you're really big on, and you've been living in, out on the Great Ocean Road for the last 12 months. I was hoping you could share a little bit more about how you split your time between, work and also raising a young family.
Yeah, look, there's so many different players and parts to that. Fundamentally, my husband, Brendan, we've built up a really great partnership where, we really wanted it to be a feminist approach and make sure that I guess I wasn't burdened more than he was in, the rigmarole of raising two boys. So that's been really great that, we've been able to share that. And luckily, Brendan works for an organisation that does provide very good parental leave and carers leave. So when I'm stuck or, at a pinch, he's always there to be able to step in and help me. So I think it really does, if you're thinking about flexible work, it can't just be on one person. I think it should be sort of a team approach and looking at, do both of your jobs enable that support to be able to help each other? So that's definitely one part of it. The other part is I think I'm just a better mother and a better parent when I'm not doing it full time. And I think I've worked that out about myself. So the kids get us from about 6 a.m. to about 9 a.m. So we do breakfast invitations where we play together through learning and activities. We get dressed together, we have breakfast, we do quite a lot in that 3-hour period. And then I ride my little bike to daycare, drop them off, and then they have a really great full day at daycare, and then I pick them up. I sort of start missing them at about 3 and I pick them up at about 4. So that's good for me. And then, again, we've got about another 4 hours. So between 4 to 8, we're able to play and have dinner and bath time. And in that way, I feel like we're able to really connect and relax. And I guess that's particularly because my job now, I'm really able to switch off after 4 p.m. And it would be very rare that I would have to take a call or answer an email. So I feel like for me, I'm able to, really switch off and then click into parent mode and then give them what they need. And then Friday, generally, there's about a half day where they call it mummy day. And so that's a really nice special day where it's just me and the boys, and we go down to a playground or to the wetlands or to the beach if it's warm enough. And we just spend time together outside. We do like treasure hunts and little fun activities like that. And then Saturday, Sunday, obviously, Brendan and my parents are around, so we kind of go for bushwalks and just relax and hang out together. So I think for me, not having to do evening work has been a really big game changer, because at Law Square, they're doing a lot of really fun, glamorous, exciting events. But I think this year or in 2020, it was good for me to not have to do as much of the evening work. I really appreciated that. But now my kids are getting, I'm not breastfeeding anymore and they're getting older. So I'll definitely be keen to be starting to do more dinners and hopefully getting back into Melbourne or traveling to Sydney to see clients. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah. At what point did you realise you needed that split between, caring for your children and work? At what point did you realise and make this work for you?
Oh, good question. I think Remy was about 18 months and I was working at Moores, and they were really great with flexible work as well. I think I was doing shorter days, but I would pick Remy up from childcare maybe at 4 p.m. and I would just be exhausted, like mentally exhausted from the day. And then Remy would be very, he would need me. He would have missed his mum and really need some connection time. And I found that I wasn't really getting that balance right. I found it very difficult to go from work mode to caring mode and to be back into parent mode. I was just kind of exhausted. And I think, I don't know, the older they get, the more interesting I find them. So I'm not so good at sort of the younger ages. It's a bit boring. I remember my girlfriend, Alison, she's very senior at a biopharmaceutical company. And she said to me, the best thing, Catherine, if you're playing around on the floor with the kids and you get bored, put on an audio book, a talking book. And I was like, genius, because, sometimes you do miss that intellectual element. But I found now that because I have these kind of stages in the day, I can really dive in with the kids, and it means I feel like I can just be like, all right, this is 3 hours. I'm going to be really creative. I'm going to be fun mum. I'm going to get on that trampoline or whatever it is, because it's not forever. And then now, talking to you and doing my day job, I love that. For me, that's kind of that's my self-care. That's my break. That's my, mental stimulation in that context. So I think it was probably at about the 18-month mark that I realised, okay, I need to have like a proper separation here, because I do really love work, but I need to be able to get into that parent mode as well.
I love how you, first of all, identified that something wasn't right, and then secondly, you took action and actually tried different things to make it work. So it's awesome.
Is that a lawyer thing, maybe?
No, I think it's good. I think a lot of people don't realise or are not self-aware, and then if they are self-aware, they just don't know what to do next. So I think it's really, really good that you were able to do that.
Thank you.
So when you had your second son, Ray, you went back to work as soon as you could. Could you share why this was so important for you? And I suppose, and if you could share the do's and don'ts of that going back to work straight away.
Well, I guess I learned through my first child that actually in the first sort of 6 months, the kids are pretty easygoing in that they sleep, they feed, they sleep, they feed. They don't have much, many requirements. So with Remington, I was going back into work probably once a week just to catch up with the team and have lunch. And they're like, what are you doing here? You're on maternity leave. Like, go relax, enjoy your baby. I'm like, yeah, but I missed you guys. I actually enjoy working in a team and I want to touch base with you. And so I think I learned with Ray that it's actually in the first sort of 6 months that you can still do things. Now, look, having said that, there were definite limitations, and I work with my brother, so there's no way I could have sat in a room and done drafting of documents. I just didn't have the brain capacity to sit down and do that. But what I did have capacity to do was review draft documents and speak to clients and do a lot of that strategy work. And a lot of our clients are still on retainer. So I would say to them, I'm still here. I haven't died. Call me. If you've got an employment issue that you want to talk through, I would love to do that. So what I did was I took baby Ray into work with me, but I also had a nanny. So what I would do is I would breastfeed baby Ray. He would go to sleep. The nanny would then take him for a walk in the Bjorn or in the pram. They would go around the city, go have coffee with their girlfriends or other nannies around. And then if he woke up and he was hungry, they would just bring baby Ray back. So there were kind of chunks of time where he wouldn't be with me, or he would be asleep, or, and so I could actually dig in. And I think that's really important, because to expect of yourself to be able to do the same job without that assistance and support, I think would be, it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky because I was working in an environment where there weren't too many other parents. And so there weren't preconceived notions from Demetrio or Trent in the leadership team around how things should happen. They were just like, let's just try. Let's just see what works, what doesn't. And so it was really that open-mindedness that enabled me to be able to sort of test it out. And having said all that, I think the most important thing I learned was that if you're going to turn up, then you're expected to turn up. Like, mm-hmm. You're going to be paid to be there. You have to really be there 100%. So, there was a time where I turned up to a leadership meeting and I wasn't prepared. I thought I was a hero just getting there and just being there on time, but I wasn't prepared, and that's not good enough. If you're going to turn up, you really have to turn up and you have to be prepared. So it is a commitment. It's not easy, but I don't think there's anything that is easy. I think it's choose which hard do you want. Do you want to be at home full time? That's hard. Do you want to be at work some of the time and arrange that and sort of push through the tough bits? Then that's great. That's your choice. But the other thing, I think it's important to keep in mind is that every few months it changes. So whatever you put in place for 3 months, that's it. That's 3 months. You just have to be constantly changing and evolving and being really prepared to have those tough conversations when things aren't working out. That's really important, that it's a two-way street in that regard as well.
Yeah. For those women that are wanting to get back to work straight away, what are some of the things they should do or implement so that, things that you've learned that you thought, I shouldn't have done that, I should do it this way? What are your learnings been along the way?
Probably the biggest thing that I learned, and this is going to sound so silly because I'm an employment lawyer, but before I went away for my maternity leave the first time with Moores, I just presumed that if I came back 2 or 3 days a week, that I would have the automatic contractual legal right to then work my way back up to the full-time role. And that's not the case. So if you want it to be the case, you have to negotiate that and put it into a contract. Otherwise, if you say to someone, yes, I used to work full-time, but I now want to come back 2 or 3 days, then that is getting rid of your previous contract and you're starting a contract afresh. So the contract that you will have in place, the only obligation that they will have to you is to provide you with that 2 or 3 days work. Mm-hmm. What if you then want to increase your time, which I did. I wanted to then go up to 4 days and then 5 days eventually. It was then a process, and I had to put forward a business case that there was that work for me available. And so that was a bit of a shock to me. And I've had a number of women calling me with that same query. And so I think it's something that just to keep in mind, if you do want to go back on the shorter time periods, but then work your way up. Be really clear about that with your employer and consider documenting that in the actual contract so that you've got that right to go back up to that 5-day-a-week job.
Good to know, because I don't think many people know that. I certainly didn't know that. So, so speak to an employment lawyer.
Yeah, definitely.
Contact Catherine.
Not me.
You've been there, you've done it, you're perfect. So how can companies and firms support those women that are wanting to, they have a child and then they're wanting to get back to work pretty much straight away? How can, and what can they do to support them in that move?
It's all about communication, and really early communication. So, you hear about these horror stories of people that say, I've been on maternity leave, apart from the flowers that they sent me in hospital, I haven't heard from them again. That's really poor. Employers have an obligation under law to keep in touch. It's a keeping in touch provision, and you actually have to keep in touch. And it was actually the businesses and Australian Industry Group that said, yeah, we really like this legal obligation placed on employers because it just encourages that keeping in touch from both parties. And we know that when there is that ongoing communication, you're much more likely to be able to get someone to return to work. And from an economic perspective, it's so crucial that we increase female participation in the workforce. We can increase our economy by the billions, KPMG have found. So it is really important from an economic perspective that we get women back to work, and what employers need to do is communicate early. And if someone says, I want to do something that's not the norm, whether that be, I want to breastfeed my kid for 4 years, help me do that in the workplace, or I want to return to work the day after my kid's born, whatever it might be, even if it sounds like a crazy idea, don't say no automatically. Talk it through and think about the practical ramifications and the operational requirements that is going to be needed to make that work. Just discuss it. The other thing that I would say is, for on the other side, for employees, don't just put in a return from maternity leave proposal and say, this is what I want to do. Talk to management around what the options might be. Because if you can get your manager to think that they've had a lot of buy-in to that return to work plan, and even if you can get them to think that it's their idea, then they're much more likely to sell the proposal internally and to approve it. So rather than just cold lob in a plan, I would recommend a lot of communication. First up, it might be a really informal coffee catch up to say, hey, I know this is a really crazy idea, but I was actually thinking about, do you reckon it would be possible to do blah? And to just sort of start planting the seed, workshopping the idea, looking at different ways in which someone could return, whether that's partially virtually, whether it's, coming into the office with a nanny or whatever it might be, just thinking through all the different options of being really imaginative and creative. And being prepared to fail. So saying to the manager, this may not work. It may not work for me, or it might not work for the business. But if we can have a really good communication and an open communication, then we can discuss that. And if it fails, but at least you gave it a crack. And as I said, I think plans only are really good for about 3 months. So you need to be constantly checking in and then changing the plans after that period too.
For women that find that their workplace is not so open, willing to discuss, or their managers are just closed-minded, just no, it's not going to work. What do they do? How do they go about it?
Yeah, it's really tough because you've basically got two choices. You can choose to be the person who advocates for change within your workplace. And I think that is an incredibly tough position to be in. And it's not a position I would recommend women put themselves in if you're in a vulnerable position. So if you've just had a baby, you are in an incredibly vulnerable position emotionally, mentally. You're incredibly sleep deprived. You've just been through a huge physical, experience. I just think it's a really tough position to put yourself into, but that's the option available to you. You would need to be an advocate within your workplace to really make systemic change. And I think it's dangerous in the sense that you could go down the route of, litigation and, anti-discrimination law. Again, that's a huge impost on you. And I think you need to be considering, is this the best position for me and my family, but sometimes it might be, and there's some courageous women out there that have, taken on that kind of approach. But the alternative option for you is to think about alternative employers and, really talking with your feet and saying to businesses, I'm actually not staying, and I'm actually looking at, I've got another opportunity available to me specifically because you're not assisting me work whilst I've got caring responsibilities. And that's a really outdated business model. So, I think they're the decisions, they're tough decisions, but I think if you can plan before you have your baby, I really think it's a 3-year proposition to be considering, okay, am I in the right job? Am I in the right workplace? If I've got 3 years before I'm going to have a baby, that's what I need to consider. And the reason why I say 3 years is because you need to be with an employer for 1 year before you're eligible to be able to take unpaid parental leave. And that means that your job is preserved when you take that parental leave. So you need to be there for 1 year. So you have to assess, are they going to be kid friendly? Are they going to help me work flexibly? Have I passed that test so that I can take the parental leave? Then you'll spend the next year trying to have a child, and obviously it can take longer, but if let's just say it takes you a year, so then you're in your second year, and then you're going to spend 9 months pregnant. So you're going to have that another 12 months put aside for planning your parental leave and planning your time away from the office. So I think the best case scenario would be that you have a 3-year plan where you can assess, is this the employer that's going to assist me do what I want to do or what I think I want to do, and support me if I change my mind, and if not, where's the employer that exists out there for me? And if you don't have that opportunity, then it's really around just making sure that every decision you make is in the best interest of your family, and don't make a decision based on principle or because you want to be an advocate for advocate's sake. Really protect, I think, yourself and your own mental health and well-being.
Yeah, good point. And before we close, what is one piece of advice you'd like to leave our audience with?
Oh, look, I think my sort of thing for the year, and it's based on my girlfriend Cheryl Ty. She runs the League of Extraordinary Women, and she's really taught me that it's so important that we live our lives in the way that we want to live them. And if we're living a life that we don't want to live, we really need to change it and to be brave enough to change it. And that might be just making really small incremental changes, or it might be making really big ones like moving to the Great Ocean Road. But I think that you should start the year, and you should start the day, and you should start your week. Like Monday should be exciting for you. And if it's not exciting and if you're not happy, then I would really recommend you think about, finding that job that is going to be good for you.
Catherine, you're incredible. So thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
And there you have it. Another episode of Gatehouse Insights draws to an end. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing this video with your friends. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel where you can see more.